Hi, and welcome to Stories We Weren't Supposed to Tell. I'm Brandon. Today's episode is Amber's story, Mother Knows Best. This story includes childhood trauma, manipulation, coercive control, false accusations that nearly tear a family apart. Amber grew up in a home where fear, perfection, and control were normal, and where the person who was supposed to protect her the most was also the person manipulating the narrative. In this episode, we talk about the long-term impacts of emotional abuse, the way manipulation can hide inside family dynamics, and what it takes to finally break from that cycle. Because of the topics discussed, please listen at your own emotional safety. This is Amber's story, and I'm going to let her tell it. Why don't you tell me about yourself, like what you think people would want to know about you?
Oh, let's see. I grew up pretty chaotic life, pretty chaotic childhood. We moved around a lot. There wasn't a lot of stability. The man that was raising us up until I was about 12 or 13 was extremely abusive. Um, I mean, physically, mentally, sexually, you name it. He was just awful to my mom, to me. Um, I think that's kind of what shaped a lot of who she became or who she was. And I mean, just yeah, it we had a really rough childhood up until I was about 13, and my mom met the man that I call my dad and married him, and that's when life kinda leveled out and became more stable or stable, period. I found out that the man that was abusing us when I was 7, I found out he wasn't really my dad. I found out that the man that I thought was my uncle was my dad.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and so he's been in and out of my life. I say in, like, he hasn't really been in my life. When I was 13, he said he'd come see me for my birthday, and then we didn't talk for 20 years.
ah,
Yeah. So I've had a really different upbringing than most people.
yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, I'm gonna start asking you questions first about your early childhood.
Mhm.
So, what did your mother tell you, like, about your birth growing up? What did she tell you about that?
I can't remember what age I was when she told me. It had to have been after I found out who my real dad or that the man was my uncle wasn't, and I wanna guess it was my early teens, maybe even mid-teens. But she had told me that, I mean, she told me he raped her, is what she told me. She said that, he had slipped her a drug, and she did not give consent, and that was how she had lost her virginity, and that he raped her, and that it was her intention to have an abortion, and that she was, had the appointment made, and she was gonna go through with it, and that one of the men at her church, she described him as a kind, elderly Black man, and I do know who it was. I have a vague memory of him, but he came to her and said, "I know you're going through something, and what you're going to do, don't do it because God has plans for her." And so I do think that that was, like, a sweet ending to the story, but but when you talk about how I was conceived, she has told me several times that I was the product of rape.
And so finding that out in a teenage years when you have so
Mhm,
much other
mhm,
stuff going on, like you're trying to shape
yep,
your identity, you feel like you don't fit in,
mhm.
and you're trying, how did that affect you?
It was hard. I think she must have thought that she was doing something sweet by telling me this story about how she could have aborted me and she didn't,
Mhm.
but I think for me, it really kinda cemented the feelings that I already had of not being wanted. You
Mhm.
know, if I think about it, it was, like, at that point that my biological dad had successfully just disappeared without a trace, and it just made me feel even more unwanted.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. Um, so tell me a little bit about the first husband that she had, or the first man that you had as
Yeah,
a father figure.
my god, he was a terrorist. I mean, up until I was 7, I thought he was my dad, but I felt no connection to him. I low key hated him. I felt repulsed by him. There's a lot of my childhood that I blacked out. Like I've tried so many times. I've gone to hypnosis. I've done EMDR. Um, I mean, I've done all the different things to try to figure out why there's these huge holes in my memory where it's literally just a black hole of nothingness. What I do remember, it had to have been when I was about 7 or 8, is when the abuse got really bad. Um, at the time, he was a heavy, heavy drinker, which we always knew that, and that's when it really, really came out, like, the abuse just got really bad. And then looking back at it now, I realized that he was using pot to, mellow him out after he'd get drunk to kinda level him, so it actually got to the point where for the longest time, the smell of marijuana would actually make me physically react, where I would get sick and I would have panic attacks,
Oh.
and it took me a long time to realize the correlation between the 2,
Mhm.
but the smell of marijuana would trigger panic attacks because I knew that was what he would do to kinda level out when he was raging. The cops were called so many times, and I think he spent, like, 1 or 2 nights in jail twice. There's one distinct memory I have when I was about 8 years old that, he, like, either banged her head through a mirror or I can't remember, like, how he did it, but he broke the glass and then he took it and he sliced her arm, and he was arrested that night, and he spent a night in jail, and she chose not to press charges and brought him back to the house, and I remember a night she came and got me from my friend's house because she knew he was at a strip club, and she wanted me to go with her, and I was about the same age, and she found him at the strip club and came in the car, crying and knew all the things that he'd been doing and just told me all of it, and, I mean, he would just lash out and become belligerent and violent, and he was always extremely cruel to me. Um, he'd just say the most awful things to me about my appearance, about my weight, about everything. Like, he would just rip me apart. And, yeah, it was really bad. Um, and I actually this last year on my birthday, I've always hated my birthdays, and I've had a hard time figuring out why. And then I had a flashback this last birthday of gosh, it had to have been, like, my 9th or 10th birthday, and my grandmother had bought me, like, this little matching training bra and underwear set, and one of them or both of them, I can't really remember which, but they burst open the door and took a picture of me in it, and I was mortified, and actually, I found that picture years ago, and I just completely blacked it out, but it was funny. It was funny that, to embarrass me. Like,
Mm.
it was normal, and so it just those things happened, and then as I got older, he got more cruel to me, and that's where it actually my memory gets even fuzzier. But I have memories of him and him masturbating and seeing it and, like, being in the room, and that's all I can remember, and I black out after that, and so I went to the therapist and the neuropsychiatrist and, "Somebody please help me, like, figure all this shit out, stuff out," and they just said, let's just accept that whatever happened to you was just that bad,
Mm.
and let's just focus on getting better."
Um, and not to dip into your story or anything, but, I was sexually abused at a young age too, and I blacked out a lot of stuff, and it's so common. It's so common, and the funny thing is people will talk to me about, like, junior high or high school, and these were years after, but I still have blacked it out,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's like when anything got hard when I was younger,
you just black out.
I blacked it out,
Mhm.
and so I feel bad because I tell people, I'm like, "I just smoked a lot of weed in high school," and then that's I leave it at that because, I
It's
don't
easier to
share that part of my life with too many people,
yeah,
but
it's hard.
and it is hard, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
This is my whole point on that one. So, um, when was like or can you pinpoint at all when you knew something was different about your home? Was there a time when you, like, had this epiphany of, "I'm different, my home is different," or did you feel like everybody's home was chaotic?
I thought everybody's home was like that. I and I was thinking about it, like, when we were kind of I was telling my husband, like, these convoluted stories of how my grandparents hooked up with each other and how, it was like, you couldn't just make this up, like, it was, like a soap opera, and they all lived in the same complex growing up, and this one hooked up with that one, and that one cheated on them with that one. But growing up for me, I had 11 grandmas and grandpas, 11 or 12, like,
Mhm.
because of marriage and removal from marriage and remarriage. I thought that was normal. I thought everybody just had that many grandmas and grandpas. So for me, it just I just thought everybody was like that, that was what was normal. And it actually wasn't until I think until I actually became of adult age and moved out on my own that I was like, "Wait a minute. This is so convoluted, like,
Mm.
so messed up. Who does this?" Like, it's just crazy, and, like, the crazy thing is, like, I still have some of my grandparents still alive, and they still talk to each other. They still talk about wanting to hook up with each other, and I'm just like, "What the hell?" Like, "What?
Yeah, they're living the dream
My
apparently, huh?
god." Like, it's just crazy. It is so crazy.
So, as a child, how did you survive emotionally day to day? Like, how did you try to keep your feelings in check?
I didn't have them. Um, I did. I mean, everyone always teased me for being the sensitive kid in the family. Like, you could look at me wrong and I would cry. You would tell me a joke and I would cry, or, I mean, even still, I look at a commercial and it tugs on my heartstrings and I just start crying. Like, I've always been a very sensitive, very empathetic person. But in the environment that I lived in up until I was 13, emotions were weakness. And if you showed emotions, that's actually when the abuse would be worse. And so I learned very young that it was just better not to talk about anything. It was better not to have feelings. It was better not to go to my parents with problems, because if I did, it wasn't going to be, let's come up with a solution. It was going to be, this is your fault. You did this. You're going to be punished. Um, my parents expected perfection. Straight A student, like, if you didn't have A's, you were a failure and you were going to be punished physically, whatever. You were going to be punished. And so I grew up just believing that nothing was ever good enough. Like, nothing would ever be good enough. And that carried with me. I mean, it's still with me to this day. If I'm not perfect, I'm panicked. I'm having anxiety attacks. I'm blaming myself. I'm crying and uncontrollable. And, I don't allow myself to be human, because that's weakness, that's failure. And
Mhm.
that's the way that I was raised.
Do you think that that shaped your conflict resolution as an adult? Do you have a hard time
Absolutely.
speaking up for yourself?
Absolutely. Boundaries has been some of the scariest things for me as an adult. Setting boundaries, maintaining boundaries, believing it was okay to have boundaries, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And it actually hasn't even been until, like, maybe the last 8 or 9 years that I've started setting boundaries for myself and saying it's okay. And even still, I'll set a boundary and I'll keep the boundary, but I will still have anxiety about it. And I will second guess if I've done the right thing, or have I hurt somebody? Have I made them uncomfortable? Am I the wrong person here? Like, and I go through it in my career as a parent, as a wife, as a friend. Like, it, everything that I feel like I go through is almost like a trauma response. Like, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of letting people down. And I did not recognize what that was until probably the last year.
Yeah. Um, so when did you really start taking on like the caregiver role? I know you said you had to pretty much grow up really
Mhm.
quick and start taking care of your
Yeah.
mom. What is your first memory of, oh, I have to make sure she's taken care of?
So it would have been about 3rd grade. Um, and that was about the time that I remember the abuse getting really bad, and him just being awful. Um, and I just remember her being a basket case. And it was like almost like she didn't have a friend, or she wouldn't go to her parents because, then then that's not being perfect and all the things that come with that. Like she has her own mental health issues and struggles with that. But it was about 3rd grade, and I I saw just how broken she was and instantly felt like I needed to take care of her. And so it was about that time that I remember my mindset shifting. And she must have recognized it because she put me in counseling. Actually, I do remember that. I started counseling when I was in 3rd grade, and that's about the time that the abuse got really bad. So I don't know if maybe that's the reason she did it or if it was, everything else that I was, being in this caregiver role. But I mean, even up till this day, like she needs somebody to take care of her. She can't really take care of herself.
So, do you think that that actually was more of a part of her manipulation to make sure you were trapped with her more than it was her
Hmm.
needing help?
Absolutely. And she's done it with partners. She's done it with my siblings. She's absolutely. She's it feels so bad saying it because it's my mom and it's the person that did give birth to me and she did raise me, and most of the time I feel like she did the best that she could, but she is a master manipulator. She absolutely is. She is calculated. She knows what she's doing and she knows the buttons to push on whoever it is. Like
Mhm.
she's masterful.
Um, do you think that, like, growing up with her, were you allowed any independence or to be yourself, to have your own personality?
So I think on deeper, she probably encouraged some independence. But in terms of like teaching me how to be a functioning adult, no, like she didn't do that.
What was your idea of perfection in your home? How did you try to control everything to make sure it was perfect? Like, how did you try to make sure that you controlled everything so
Hmm.
that way you didn't have to have anxious moments?
Obedience.
Convenience?
Yeah. Yeah. Being obedient, never questioning the norm, never breaking the rules, never talking back, getting good grades, just always doing what I was told. That kept me safe.
Okay. And then, what what was your first thing? Did you feel fear growing up more, or would you say safety?
Absolutely fear. I mean, my house was ruled out of fear. Like everything that was expected of us, and it wasn't, um, you weren't rewarded for good things or complimented for good things. Everything was done out of fear. Both of my parents, up until I was 13, ruled with an iron fist. And you didn't do things because you were being a good kid or because, whatever, you were doing it because you were afraid of the consequence of not doing it.
Mhm,
And so it very much shaped me into being a fearful, timid person because I was afraid of the consequences of not being perfect.
mhm. 'Kay, tell me about your dad, the person that you actually refer to your dad as. Tell me about him. Take your time.
He saved me. He was he was everything to me. Um, Met him right before my 13th birthday, and they got married not long after that, and I just felt like he saw me, and I think looking back at it, it was because he could relate so much to his own traumas from his childhood. He had a very similar upbringing where his parents were a very strict Christian household, and he was always like the black sheep because he wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He struggled with mental health. But he just treated me like a person,
Mhm,
like a kid. And he would constantly say that I was the daughter he got to choose. And he was kind to me, and he took me under his wing, and he would just talk to me and he would teach me and he would just be there for me. And it was the first time in my life where I felt like I could breathe and I could just be. And I didn't have to be this facade of perfection. And even if I like even if I wasn't perfect, he would say, "It's okay, Doodlebug. It's okay. Like, I got you. It's okay. We're gonna figure it out." And it gets hard because he was only in my life for a very short time in comparison. Um, he ended up taking his life in 2016. And
How old were you?
I was 30 now. But I moved out when I was 18. But he was my dad. We he just saw me. He got me. He knew he could relate. And he let me feel like it was okay to just be me and not have to be anything else. And that's the hard part. Like I've been without him for 10 years now and miss him every day. He was the best.
Okay, so now let's talk about leaving home. So I cut you off to where you're at. But what was your first thought of I got to get the hell out of here? What was going through your mind with that?
Well, I had met my ex-husband
Mhm.
and I was ready to move out and just get out on my own and just be. There wasn't like any event that like pushed me over the edge where I was like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm out of here." It just felt right. It felt like the time for me to go and I was ready to make the move. So I was ready to go to school. I was ready to just jump in.
Okay. And then when you broke the news to your mom, how did she react?
Um, she acted happy. And then when the day came, she was pretty upset, pretty emotional. I mean, I was the oldest child and, leaving the nest and everything. Um, but I mean, I don't know, she kind of gave me mixed signals. Happy, but then sad and angry and resentful and making snide remarks. And it was dependent on who was in the room to see the reaction.
And at that time, did you realize that was part of her manipulation or were you just still
Mm-mm.
blind
I
to it?
was completely blind to it. Absolutely blind to
Mhm.
it.
Okay. Um, did she help you with the move at all? Did she
She wanted to, financially, she wanted to, and I told her, "No, I wanted to do this myself, I was ready to do this on my own." She didn't like that, um, but, we did. My ex-husband and I and his cousin, we packed everything up that I owned in a truck and, just a F-150 and moved down here.
Okay, let's talk about your wedding planning.
Oh
Let's
my
talk
god.
about the wedding plan.
That was the worst. That was around the time that I really started to realize how bad, um, the narcissistic traits were. I mean, she wanted control of everything. She wanted to have the colors be her colors. She wanted the floral arrangements to be hers, and we had a friend who was doing our floral arrangements as a gift for the wedding,
Mhm.
and she just steamrolled that. She wanted everything this way, and then on the day of the wedding, she told them that they looked like garbage and they weren't good enough, and they picked a venue, like, 4 hours away from where we lived, and it was up in the mountains, and we went along with it because they were paying for it, but a lot of people couldn't make the trip. It was very inconvenient, and she made the biggest fit about my sister being my maid of honor, and I didn't want her to be my maid of honor because she was just like her dad and still is. And she just it just everything was a fight, everything was an argument. I gave in so many times because it was just better than having a fight.
I know that.
Yeah,
I know that feeling of when it's like, I'm just gonna let him have it.
because it's easier, and then it's like, yeah, you get mad at yourself because 'cause you're like, "I'm just enabling this behavior," but at the same time, I don't have the strength to fight it.
Mhm.
Like, what do I do?
And people don't realize that until you've been worn down for so long.
Mhm,
People don't understand that. Like, why don't you stick to your guns? Why don't
mhm.
you do this and that? And you just don't understand until you've had a relationship like that.
Painful.
Hmm.
It drains everything from you.
Instead of bridezilla, it was momzilla.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of fights around our wedding day. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the rumor she and your sister decided to spread. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit because that's kind of juicy.
So I still don't even know what prompted them to start this heinous rumor. So my sister, again, she's just very much like her dad, and she was actually hooking up with one of my then husband's friends. They were, in the hot tub and just having a good time cutting up. And of course, my husband and I, we had a suite at the property where we got married. So he was with me the entire night, and they told my entire family that he had spent the night trying to get her into bed, even though he was with me. And a lot of people in my family believed it. And it turned into just this ugly, nasty rumor. And people were calling me and you need to leave him. He's trying to hook up with your sister. How could you stay married to somebody like that? And I was just like, what are you guys even talking about? I was with him. I was there. Like, this is so insane.
So they're could they just not stand to see you happy? What do you think the reasoning behind that was?
I really think it had something to do with my freedom, my independence. Like, I really think that my mom wanted me to come running to her, "Mommy, I need you to fix this. I'm broken. Everything's broken, and you're the only person that can fix it, and I need you to save me." And when I moved out on my own, she was the last person I needed to save me, and that was hard for her. Still is hard for her.
How did that change the way you saw her? What did that make your mind flip? Like, did it give you a complete like, what the hell?
At first, it didn't. At first, I was like, "Maybe this is a one-off." Maybe things are just really bad and maybe she's having a rough go and, losing her oldest or whatever. At first, I didn't think it was a behavior. I didn't realize it was a pattern. And then I think it was the following year, we went on a camping trip with them. And she called me after the trip and she was freaking out. And she's like, "He stole all of our Vicodin from the trailer, and we have proof, and we have fingerprints, and we're sending it to the FBI. And I hope he's ready to go to jail." And just like this whole elaborate story. And I was just like, "What the hell?" And I asked him, and he's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, why would I do that? Like, why would I steal a whole bunch of pills from somebody and send it to the FBI, whatever this is? Like,
Yeah,
send
do
it
it.
off."
Be about it.
Which nothing ever happened. Like, we never heard anything else after that, but it was another attempt at sabotaging our relationship and just throwing him under the bus. Like, he endured a lot of, uh, chaos, ridicule, rumors, just everything, belittling, all of it.
So that kind of went with my next question of did the behaviors continue? So yes, they did. And of course they would.
They did, and actually with each one that happened, I just grew further and further away from the family. I just as it started to happen more and more, and I was recognizing this pattern, I started to distance myself more and more, and it was more peaceful.
Do you think you did that more because of him and your children than yourself? Do you think having them there and trying to protect them from your mom? Do
Possibly,
you think you
possibly.
would have put up with it more if it would have just been you?
It's possible. I think back then I was terrified to stand my ground, and I will say, like, to his credit, I mean, we're long since divorced, but he he was very quick to point out, like, Do you see this behavior? Like, people don't act like this. This isn't normal." And I mean, his mom and I she became more like a mom to me, in that she was the maternal force that I would go to for guidance and for help and for counseling. Um she was there for me and helped me through a lot more than my mom was, and she would say, "Do you realize, like, this is toxic, this is dangerous, like, this is unhealthy, like, people don't act like this, moms don't act like this, parents don't act like this." And it wasn't until people started to say that, like, "Parents don't act like this." And I was like, "They don't? Like, this isn't normal?"
Since when?
Yeah, like, this is all I know. Like, this just seems, like regular business to me,
Mhm,
And it wasn't until my mid-20s that I was like, "Oh my god, you guys are right. Like, this is this is wrong."
mhm.
And it took me a long time to even recognize that it was so toxic.
So, what do you feel like was your hardest boundary at that time? What was your hardest boundary to enforce?
That I was entitled to my own decisions and that she needed to accept it. And she had a very hard time accepting any decisions I made. Moving into my own apartment, and then when he and I got married, we moved into an apartment together, and that was wrong, and, that you'll never succeed there, and then when we purchased our first house, it was a townhouse, and why would you purchase a townhouse? That's such a bad investment, and, like, everything was just questioning who we were as adults, and then, when I went to nursing school, like, she knew I'd wanted to be a nurse since I was 7, and she was just so surprised by that. I'm like, "You're never gonna be able to afford it. Or you really think you're gonna be able to do that? Like, how are you gonna pay for yourself to get through school?" I was like, "I'm gonna find a way. I will get through it." But just that lack of belief in me was always present. "You're not gonna be able to do it. You're not gonna succeed. You're gonna fall."
Mhm,
That was and then you're gonna need me to pick you back up. And that's what I'm gonna do because 'cause you're gonna need your mom.
mhm. But moms are supposed to help you,
Right.
so you don't have to pick yourself back up, mom. Okay, so, let's talk about the first CPS call.
Oh, yeah. So, um so my ex-husband and I split, and I didn't tell my mom for several months, um, for a lot of reasons. I knew what her first response was going to be. I knew that she was going to say, "Well, you need to come back home. You need to pack up the kids and come back home." And I wasn't gonna do that. There was never a time that I was going to do that. Um, and I didn't know at that point if we were gonna be separated or if we were gonna follow through with divorce, and so I didn't want this already negative situation. I didn't want him cast in any further negative light because I already knew how my mom was, and I didn't want any part of that. So finally I did tell her, and she said, "Well, you need to come home." And I said, "No, I am home. This is where I live now. I'm happy here." And I said, "And just because he and I aren't going to work out doesn't take away from the fact that he is a good present dad." And I said, "And I needed that when I was growing up. I'll be damned if I take my kids away from a good dad to make me comfortable." I said, "So I'm staying here." And she said, "No, you can't do this on your own." And I said, "Yes, I can, and I will, and I have been. Like, I'm good. I'm fine." And so it was maybe like a month or so later, I get a phone call from a woman who tells me that she's an investigator with CPS. And she said, "We have a pretty hefty complaint here, and we need to come to your home to investigate." And I, of course, just freaking out. And at the time, I actually thought it was my ex husband's girlfriend. Um, they had started talking and doing stuff while we were married. And so I thought maybe this was her way of just sticking it to me a little further.
Mhm,
Um, but then I found out that because he was in law enforcement, that if, a complaint was lodged, that he would be investigated too, and he could potentially lose his job. So when the woman showed up at our house or my house, she said, "I have to do a thorough investigation of your home, your cupboards, your bedrooms. I need to check your animals, all the things." And so she did all that, went through everything. Everything was good. Like, there was nothing for anyone to be worried about. So then she sat me on the couch and she said, "Amber, I gotta tell you."
No, you can say your name. You
Okay.
can say your name, you can say Dallas's name, everybody else's name, let's not say it.
She said, "I gotta tell you, whoever wrote this complaint really has it out for you." And I was like, "Okay, why?" And she pulls out this paper, and the whole thing is just paragraph after paragraph of just these vile, horrific complaints. In it, the complainant said that I was letting my kids eat animal feces, that they were starving, that they were going and knocking on the neighborhood kids' doors begging for food. Mind you, at that time, like, I was the mom that the little neighborhood kids would bring me flowers, and I would give them the cute little snacks and the gummy fruits and
Mhm.
all the things, and so that one, like, really crushed me 'cause I was like, "Wait a minute, everyone comes to me for the good snacks because 'cause
Mhm.
I've got the junk food in here," you know?
Yeah. I'm the fun
Yeah,
neighborhood
I'm
mom.
the fun one, and I have, like even to this day, some of those little neighborhood kids I'll see out at the high school, and they're like, "I remember when I used to bring you flowers," and, just, like, the cutest little things. Um But it said my kids were starving, that their teeth were rotting out of their head, that I wasn't giving them medical care, that they didn't have beds to sleep on, that my home was infested with bugs, that I was bringing random men over to the house and having sex with them in front of my children. Um, yeah, I mean, it was the list went on, and it was vile, and I just sat there with, like, the biggest pit in my stomach, and I thought, who would hate me so much that they would say these disgusting things about me? And I started crying, and she said, "I'm so sorry that you're going through this, and I don't know who it was. I can tell you it was a woman that called, but that's all I know. They didn't leave a name. They just gave us this huge complaint, and we have to legally follow up on it." And I said, "Well, I understand you're just doing your job. I appreciate that." They went to my son's school, they went to my children's daycare center, they interviewed their teachers and the principals and the counselors, and, they went through everything. They went to my ex's house and, investigated his home and did the same thing with him, went to the police department, and they did a very thorough investigation. And of course, everything was not substantiated. There was no truth to it whatsoever. Um, but up until that point in my life, I never did know who it was. The only person that I suspected was his girlfriend, but it wasn't her. And it was 2 years later or a year later, I moved out to west the western part of the county. So I was in a different subdivision, and I got a phone call, and it was a man from CPS, and he said, "Amber, I'm calling you. We're going to do this again." And he said, "I have to come to your home because you've recently moved and I have to do this again." And I said, "Okay, I know what to expect this time. So come on in." Yeah. So he came the next day, actually. And the second I opened the door, he looked at me and he said, "We both know that me being here is a waste of time." And he said, "I don't know who hates you this much, but I hope you figure it out soon because this is actually taking away from real victims." He said, "So I'm going to do my part. I'm going to walk through the house. I'm going to look through the cupboards. I'm going to do all the things. And that's where it ends." He said, "We both know that this is bullshit." And I said, "Yeah, but okay, let's do it."
Mhm.
So we go through the house, and, he's not happy to be there, and he's doing his eye rolls and, talking his crap and whatever. And we sit down afterward, and he said, "Look, the complaint is almost identical, like almost word for word identical." He said, "Except this time they've added that they think you're using drugs." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, give me a drug test. I'll pass it." And he said, "I'm not here to do that." And I said, "Okay, but I'm here to tell you, I'll take them. I'll take 1,000 of them and I'll pass." And he said, "No." He said, "We're just going to close this case. I hope I never have to come out here and do this again. I'm sorry you're going through this, but you need to figure this out. Like, you need to figure it out." And he said, "I will tell you that this time the caller was a male." I said, "Okay, well, doesn't give me a whole lot to go off of." So he goes out to his car, and the caller must have given a return phone call number. So he talks to him, and he comes back to the door. He says, "Hey, caller wants to talk to you. That's my grandpa."
Oh, no.
And he said he was crying at that point, and he said, "Amber, I am so sorry." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "It was your mom." He said, "Your mom is toxic poison. You have to get her out of your life." He said, "She is evil." And he said, "She called me. She said you were on drugs. She said that you were losing weight and that you know all these things about the kids. And she told me what I needed to say word for word to CPS to get somebody out there to intervene." and to take the kids away from you. And he said, and the only reason that we were going to take the kids away from you was because you needed help and you needed to go to rehab. And I said, Grandpa, I'm not on drugs. I'm going through a divorce. I'm going to the gym. I'm playing ball. I'm active. I'm trying to lose weight. I want to lose weight, but I'm doing it the right way. I said, I'm good. And he cried and cried. He said, your mom, she scripted me on what to do. She told me what to say. And she said, that this had happened before and that nothing ever happened. And then he had called my ex husband's mom and just waylaid her. And how could you let her get on drugs? And how could you not step in and take care of the kids? And just all the things, like, just horrible, horrible things. And he felt so guilty. And I remember him feeling so guilty that he sent me checks to go buy the kids school clothes because he just felt so bad. And he felt like sending some money would help kind of remedy that situation. And he just kept saying, "Your mom is poison. You've got to get away from your mom."
So how did that once again change your attitude and your outlook towards your mom?
I cut her off immediately. I said, we're done here. Like, do not contact me again. We're done here. I said, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, yes, you do. You did this. I can't believe you would do this to me. And she said, I can't believe that you have CPS coming in here and trying to threaten to take away your kids, and you don't think that it's time for you to come home. And I said, how many times do I have to tell you I am home? I'm not taking my kids away from their father. I'm good. I'm stable. I have a job. I'm good. My kids are happy. They're in a good school. Their dad takes them every so often. Why would I ever uproot them for anybody? Like, I will sit here and suffer before I uproot my kids to make you happy. And she's just like, I didn't do this. And I said, yes, you did. And now I know it was you because grandpa told me. And I said, I didn't know who it was the first time. Now I know it was you. And we didn't speak for years. And then and I didn't speak to my dad either because I had him kind of guilty by association. And then I got pregnant with my youngest in 2015, and we were driving back from Denver. We got in a really bad car accident, and it was scary, like the whole ambulance, riding through the canyon and stuff. And my grandma was worried, my mom was worried, and going through my grandma to communicate. And I just thought, all right, I'm going to put this behind me. I'm going to let bygones be bygones. I'm never going to trust her again. It'll never be the same, but she is my mom. I'll give her a chance. And she convinced my dad to tell me that it was him that called CPS. And he kept falling on that sword. And I said, you don't have to lie for her. No, Doodle. No, 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 no. I did it. I did it. It was only me. It was all my idea. And I said, then why was the first caller a female? And he had no answer for that. He had no rebuttal. He's like, no, 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 no. It was me. It was me. It's like, no, it wasn't. Stop covering for her. Stop lying for her. Stop letting her manipulate her into falling on the sword.
And that was just his submission.
Yep. 100%.
It was easier just to
Yep.
be the bad guy.
It was.
Alright. So you broke it off with
Mhm.
her, and then, of course, you just said that she came back, but how was it for you to break the cycle? Like,
Awkward and hard. She lives in a fantasy world. And it's not even like a pleasant fantasy world. Like, she lives in a house of misery. And misery loves company and the chaos, and she needs that drama. She needs that. I don't even want to say entertainment because I don't think that's the right word. She thrives off the chaos, though. And it makes her feel needed when people are coming to her
mhm.
and needing them to, she needs her to save them. And for me, I don't need that in my life. I don't want that in my life. And I have to set very firm boundaries with her. And I have to do it frequently. I still have to do it with her. And she doesn't always honor them. And that's when I just unplug and I say, okay, call me when you're ready because I'm not doing this. I'm not It's not my job to save you. It's not my job to fix you. It's nobody's job to fix you, but she has a way of manipulating people into her reality. And she still does it with my grandma so much. Like, I actually had to fact check my grandma like 2 or 3 months ago. And she was talking about how they had been in a fight and they hadn't spoken for months and then they worked it out. And I remember my grandma saying something, I can't remember what it was, but she said something. I was like, Grandma, that's not what happened. I said, do you not remember that she actually attacked you? You tried to hold boundaries with her, and then she got mad at you and wouldn't speak to you. She cut you off. She goes, "Oh, totally right. Like, I totally forgot about that." And she's like, "How do you do that? How do you how do you do that?" I said, "You just have to. You have to maintain your boundaries. You have to see through the manipulation. You have to stop letting her manipulate you and create this false narrative about whoever and whatever." But she continues to do it.
So, when do you think was the point when you actually could pinpoint her manipulation? Because, like, for me, and and the few talks with people that I do have in my life, it's almost comical to me now because I'm like, I know what you're doing,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna choose. Am I gonna play into this a little bit, or am I just gonna tell you that you're full of shit?
Yeah. Like,
I mean,
do you give him the rope or do you just stop it right there?
yeah, because sometimes I'm like, "This could be a little bit fun," you know. Because sometimes I just wanna
Like,
get him
how far
back,
are you gonna go?
sometimes
Yeah.
I just wanna be like, "Ha ha, see what I can do,"
Uh-huh.
but then I'm like, "No, you can't be a piece of crap too." So,
Right.
but when do you think time frame, age frame, were you able to say, "I know what you're doing," in my head, like, "I know what you're doing."
Probably the last 3 or 4 years. It has taken me a very long time to recognize it, but not just recognize it, acknowledge it and handle it and just not feed into the bullshit. Like, I'll let her rant. I'll let her just kinda and I'll sit there kinda just tweeting my hands like, "Okay, sure, that's what's going on."
Mhm.
But I'll fact check her too, and
Yeah.
she hates that. She absolutely hates that, and that's when she shuts down. And, it's just been the last probably few years that I've actually been able to recognize it and say, "No, mm-mm, that's not what happened." Even the abuse that we endured as kids, like, she doesn't remember it that way. And
Mhm.
I'll still have times where to this day, like, I'll tell my husband, like, "Maybe I'm remembering it wrong," But that's how good she is at manipulating people to where you're like, "Yeah, maybe that's what happened. Maybe that didn't happen." And I think that's also part of the reason that I just blocked so much of it out because it was not only heinous, like, I know I went through some really bad stuff, but also because she just has this way of manipulating reality that it makes you question what's real and what's not. I mean, even a couple weeks ago, she did that, and she's going through a split up of herself of her own right now. And she's got everyone convinced that he's the devil. I'm like, no, he's not. He's been putting up with you and you've been unkind to him. And she was awful to my dad and still talking to my abuser while she was married to my dad.
Mhm.
Just the things that she does are so narcissistic and selfish. And but she doesn't think that there's anything wrong with it.
Mm-mm.
She's self-serving.
A lot of times people don't,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Um, what do you feel like your healing looked like in the beginning?
Painful. I mean, who wants to talk about their mother this way or think about their mom this way? Like, as kids, especially if you grow up in any kind of religious upbringing, we're taught to honor our mother and father.
Mhm.
And it hurts. Like, it hurts to think about that this is who my mom is. And it just, it's hard. And I feel bad even saying these things about her right now because I'm just like, she did the best that she could with what she had, but then I'm like, "No, like, this isn't okay," you know? It's hard to find the right words for it, you know? And healing from it is hard because some of the healing I won't say all of the healing because I don't think I'll ever fully remember everything that happened in my childhood for good reason. But part of the healing is acknowledging that these things did happen and that I did experience them. And I can't get that time back. I can't get those years back. All I can do is look at my own children and think, I will never put that through them or put them through that. I will never, never make them feel the way that I did. I will never make them feel like they are anything less than perfect. And they don't have to make honor roll or be the star football player or whatever to have value in my eyes. They will always be my biggest treasures,
Mhm.
and they'll never have to know that pain. And that's all I can really do is that's how I heal, is through them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And you just answered my next question without me asking it, because my next question was going to be, how did it affect your parenting and how?
So much. A lot of my childhood was like a lot of my memories, apart from you have to be perfect, it wasn't just that you had to have perfect grades, but you had to be pretty or, like actually I was the ugly duckling is what everybody called me in the family. Growing up, I was the ugly duckling.
You are
And
absolutely beautiful.
thank
And I
you.
bet you were just as beautiful when you were younger.
I don't know. I was
So,
awkward, but I ended up with a pretty horrific body dysmorphia,
mhm,
and a lot of my worth has been tied to my looks. Like if I don't feel like I look perfect, which I never do anyway, but if I'm down and I'm not looking a certain way, or like I have days where I just can't even look in the mirror because I'm like, oh, I look old and there are wrinkles and all this body fat and all the things that I remember my mom just picking apart when I was a kid. And even still, I'll go see, oh, look, your grays are coming through, or you're getting those wrinkles, girl. Like all those things, and I just think like, I'll never let my kids think like that. They will never, they will never wonder if they're beautiful. Like
mhm,
they are beautiful. And like my brother, he's got body dysmorphia too. And it comes from my mom and it came from my grandma. And I watched my family just go through this whole cycle
mhm.
and they've all just created this mess.
Mm. My last question. We're on the last question. If you right now could go back to that little girl, that first little girl you remember, and you could talk to her, what would you tell her?
There are better days ahead. This will hurt for a little while, but it's not your fault. And there will be a happy ending for you. Just stay strong. Remember to love yourself and don't let this destroy you. And don't let it be an excuse to become a bad person. Use it, feel it, embrace it, but don't let it change you. And don't let it let you love people any less. And don't be scared to let people in down the road. And I would tell that to anybody that's struggling with abuse and narcissism. Just break the chains. It can be done, and you can do it in a healthy way that's not destructive. And don't let yourself get lost because of other people. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about being in any kind of relationship with a narcissist is it's so easy to lose your own identity because you're constantly feeling the need to please them. And once you can actually break that cycle, that's when the real healing begins. And it's always better late than never.
Mhm.
Like get out and be, just be happy.
Before we close this episode, I want to leave you with something Amber said during our conversation that really stuck with me. She reminded us that no matter how dark days feel, when you're living inside manipulation and control, there are better days ahead. And sometimes the first steps towards those better days is simply realizing that what you are experiencing isn't love, it's control. If Amber's story felt familiar to you, please know you are not alone. There are people who care and resources that can help. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE or visit thehotline.org. THEHOTLINE.org to chat with an advocate. It's free, confidential, and available 24 hours a day. Amber, thank you for having the courage to share your story with us. Stories like yours help others recognize what they're going through and remind them that healing is possible. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here and for being willing to hear the stories that so many people were told to keep quiet. If you have a story you'd like to share, you can reach us at sunshinefaymedia@gmail.com, sunshinefaymedia@gmail.com. You don't have to be healed, you just have to be honest. Join us on our next episode for Ashley's story. And let me tell you, she went through one hell of a ride. Until then, remember, even the darkest chapters have better days ahead.